talk to you today about branding. So without further ado, so branding is an introduction. So basically, for straight away, what is branding? That's what I'm actually going to cover in simple terms. It's only a short presentation, but it should give you an insight into, for a start, straight away, what is branding? Next thing we're going to cover is, why is it important? How does it make a massive difference? Why is so much money spent on branding? So first off, what is branding? And if we say that to most people, what do they actually think? Well, most people actually think of something called logos, or as we call in the trade, idents, short for identities. See, the thing is, when you say branding to somebody, they normally think of a large company, such as IBM, and they think this is a brand, but it's not. This is actually just a logo. It's just a very small part of it. In this case, it's a logo type. It can, for example, be a symbol. We all know what this stands for. It's the Olympic Committee, or the movement, the Olympic movement, but it isn't actually a brand. Brand is something completely different. It can be a tagline. Again, it's just an identity, something that we all see and we associate with branding. Now, brand is something completely different. I love this statement. Your brand is what other people say about you when you're not in the room. That's what a brand is. A brand is a personality that identifies a product, service, or even a person. So it's a personality. It's something far more than just a simple set of images. And we say a brand has value. But what is this? What do we mean when we say a brand has value? We'll take McDonald's. We all know McDonald's. We see it everywhere. Wherever you go around the world, you can see McDonald's. I've been to so many different countries and passed a McDonald's. What do I always know whenever I see the McDonald's sign? I always know it's going to be the same. Oh, there might be the little idiosyncrasies. The bread might be slightly different. But the fact is, 9 times out of 10, it is really a similar experience. The language might be different, the currency different. But when I walk into McDonald's, I know exactly what I'm going to get. I know exactly what I'm going to get. And yet, in fact, all of those McDonald's around the world are actually franchises mostly. They're actually all separate companies owned by individual people. They've all accepted the brand, the whole personality that is McDonald's, and getting it across so that myself, the tourist, the visitor, always knows what I'm getting. And it can be really, really, really powerful. We know, for example, a lot of people just call it the whoosh or the tick. We know who it is, Nike. We know where they came from, but do we? They started off as nothing more than trainers or running shoes, actually, for athletes. But look at them now. It's one of the cleverest branding companies in the world. Why? Because now the majority of what it sells are actually reconfigured former ideas. It's not even having to put that much effort into actually finding new ways to make shoes. An awful lot of what it makes from is simply from relaunching old stock or old designs. That's because we really bought into the brand. We know what we're getting and we want to be part of it, which is an interesting thing, wanting to be part of a brand. Take this. We know Rolex. Do we know what it really means? Well, to an awful lot of people, Rolex means you've arrived. When you can afford to buy that Rolex, you have arrived. Arrived where? It's aspirational. It's a brand that's all about aspirational values. In other words, I want to be seen to be able to afford a Rolex. It's that brand. It's a far, far bigger thing than a simple logo. Oh, and this one. Ever heard this before? Sorry, it's Pepsi. Is that okay? You know where you hear it? You hear it quite often in a lot of English bars, pubs, restaurants. Why? Because the brand is so strong from the original Coca-Cola that we actually use that name to identify with that form of drink. Sound peculiar or sound familiar? Think of a Hoover. We all say, oh, I'm going to do the Hoovering, or I'm going to do a Hoover. The Hoover, it was the actual name of one of the original brands. It's actually a vacuum cleaner. Part of me wonders if it's actually going to become a Dyson one day. Brand value is a set of guiding principles that dictate the brand. Okay, simple set of principles. First off, the message. What is the message that the brand is trying to get across? And there is a message. There's always a message. What is that brand standing for? Then there's the look and the feel. Does everything is consistent and looks the same? And that finally gives you a personality. And it's these things that make up that brand value. You know, that message. What is it you're trying to say? What is it you're getting across? The look, making sure everything is on look, all looks the same. Everything, you know, when we think about Coca-Cola a second ago, we know the exact colors they're going to use in absolutely everything. Then there's that personality. And that maybe comes across in the advertising that's used. We know with Coca-Cola, it's trying to get this fun feel across. And we say if you're a company and you're trying to find your brand value proposition, there are 4 simple steps. Step 1, discover what matters. And that's discover what matters to you. You know, you are the brand, it's your brand, your company. There are things that are going to be really important to you. When you wanted to start that company, when you wanted to start that venture, what was it that really drove you? Then it's know your customers and competitors. Your customers, you know, we often talk about this, but do we really know them? You know, you need to know exactly who is it I'm trying to sell my products or my services to. What are they like? Who are these people? What ages are they? Where do they come from? What do they like to spend their money on? What is important to them? And then know your competitors. Who else is trying to service that market? How can I make sure by knowing my competitors that I stand aside, away from my competitors? Next, stand for something. People want to be aspirational. They want to see that you stand for something important and they want to actually be part of that. Now, that might just be a case of having great, you know, like for example, Style Sense. It might be a fashion brand that says, look, you know, buying into us buys into great fashion sense. Or it might be something far, far more important, you know, standing for something that's ecologically sound. And then stay consistent. Every single thing that a brand must do is important, but probably the most important thing is to be consistent, making sure that every single time, every single thing that goes out stays on brand, as we call it, makes sure that the message is always the same. Next, we said, what is branding? We've given you a rough idea. You know, we've talked about it in very large terms. We know roughly what a brand is. We know it's not just a simple logo. We know it's far, far more than that, and it talks about more. But why is it important? Can it make a difference? You know, do people spend a lot of money on branding? Yes. They spend millions on branding all the time. Why? Why is it so important? Take these 2. And I'm going to use a simple couple of cases to try and get this across. Normally I would use a lot more, but we wanted a very short lecture capture today. So we just wanted a couple of cases. One of my favorite is this one, Apple and Microsoft. I kind of like, for me in my industry, I kind of grew up with this. I'm somebody that used an Apple Mac from very early on. I got into it very early on. And I remember the great competitiveness that was between the 2 of them. And is branding important with both of them? Yes, it's amazing what's happened if you really look at the history of these 2. Steve Jobs, one of the co-founders of Apple in 1976. So he's one of the co-founders in this one of the first personal computers, a computer that was like most of what we use at home now. That's actually in front of us. We've got a computer like I'm on my laptop now, talking about a system that uses a mouse to interact with things on the screen rather than putting loads of code in. Came up with a fantastic idea, started this company, and then left. And then it was interesting what happened then with Apple as it went into the wilderness. And it's interesting actually, because this is the chain of idents or logos for Apple over the years. There's the original one in 1976. Not many of us know that, but we do know the next one. An awful lot of us know that next one that went from 77 to 98. And then something happened, and in 98 onwards, you'll see a lot of similarity. Sorry. Do you know why? Because that's when Steve Jobs came back. He left the company and went and did a load of other things, really interesting things, like setting up Pixar, amongst other things. He then came back to the company and managed to get hold of the company again. And he suddenly invigorated the brand. At that point, Apple was struggling. It was almost in bankruptcy. They had tried to manufacture just their own PCs. They wouldn't let anyone else use the operating system, whereas Microsoft had grown enormous by letting anyone use the operating system. Arguably, Microsoft had won the day. Steve Jobs thought differently, and he thought that ultimately, with good branding, in the long run, Apple would take over. And that's exactly what he did. He got himself in control of everything. Consistency through, not just the way the software works, but the way every single end product looks, feels. Everything, not just the website, advertising, but everything from the box through the packaging. Everything just shouts Apple and shouts their brand at people, the aspirational brand, shouting that everyone wants to be part of this. And now we know how big Apple is. It's suddenly worldwide. It's amazing how many people I talk to now that are now everyone it seems has an iPhone or an iMac. It's not just designers like myself. We were the original people because it was really kind of designed for us right at the very beginning. But now everyone has it, and it's become this massive company, known worldwide, and it stands for something. Why? Great innovation, yeah, of course, but mostly very, very clever branding. Branding, is it everywhere? Yeah. Who are the unspoken masters of branding? I love this when I show my students. Who, if you think of branding, what do you mean? We talked about McDonald's earlier. Why is everything the same? The colours are the same. Let's look at the people that work there. Everything they say is the same. They act in a certain way. It might be different languages, as I said, but the uniform is the same. And that hierarchy, you can tell who's the manager and everyone else in the company. Where does that all come from? Where does branding really come from? Well, the ultimate masters, as they are with any country, are within the services. Think about that for a second. They're the people that almost invented branding, invented the whole thing of there's no I in team. That is everything about branding. And actually, if you stop and think about that, it makes an awful lot of sense. And you can see why it would be so important to someone like, say, for example, McDonald's or quite frankly, every time you walk into an Apple Mac shop, they all look the same. They all dress the same way. It's all part of this that comes, branding is literally comes very much from how countries have treated their armed services. Can it be changed? That's an interesting one. There's a lot of companies that this is my second I talked to you about Apple and I talked about Microsoft. Now let me talk to you about another company. It's kind of like an example, but this case is an example when something can be changed. Land Rover. One of the oldest brands in the UK. When you say Land Rover to most people, they know what we're talking about. We're talking about a utilitarian four-wheel drive vehicle, great, very good off-road. Yeah, okay, that's great. That's where it started from. It started from the very, very first Land Rover. But then it started to get far more vehicles, and they all stood for the same thing, though. It all stands for this like indestructible vehicle that you can take anywhere and you can do anything with. That was their branding. That's all it was about. Even when they bought out one of the most expensive vehicles you could ever find, like the Range Rovers, the branding for them, their advertising was all about this. It's they're indestructible, But the fact is, this is when the problem happened. At that point, Land Rover knew there were problems, and the story goes that a very large branding company were invited in to talk to them, to say to them what has gone wrong, where it's gone wrong. So they sat down and they said, well, you tell us what you think the brand is. And when they listened to all these executives and all these people working at Land Rover, they said, right, okay, here you go. This is what you think the brand is. It actually is like a water buffalo. Well, just think about what you've just called yourself. You're just like this indestructible thing that is happy on land and in water and everything else, and it's stubborn. We've got some news for you. The vast majority of people who buy Range Rovers are never going to take them off road. That's not what they want to be seen. And they changed that brand overnight. They changed the brand, and then it had such a powerful effect changing it overnight that it actually changed the sort of vehicles that Land Rover actually invented. Instead of just being these really capable four-wheel drives, which I'm sure they still are, now all of a sudden they are luxury brands in themselves, and they have sub-brands, smaller and smaller, going down. The Evoque, for example. All of this has come about because somebody looked at the branding and said, you need to change to move forward. So, I hope I've given you an insight to branding today, told you a little bit about it, given you a couple of working examples of how it is, how it's used. hope I've made you think maybe the next time you actually go in and ask for a Coke and someone says, well, is it Pepsi, is it okay? And it makes you think that actually, do you know, that's how clever branding is. And the next time you go to Hoover at home, you think, well, actually, that's because it's named after something. And the next time you go to McDonald's, maybe. This is just the first of a series that we're hoping of small lectures to do for you. So this is just to lead on to the next one. You know, so you need a big budget and an even bigger team. I mean, you can imagine Land Rover. Well, not really. And that's what I want to talk about next time. Someone you probably don't even know, but the New York Times, regards Nick Wooster as a one-man brand. And he's just one of the case studies I want to tell you about next time. Thank you.